This is the end of the beginning. Welcome to today's show. Now we have Louisiana, which has been a target of the government for quite some time, under what we're looking at here, once again, massive wildfire attack. And people who are not able to connect the dots are obviously already a lost cause at this point. And we hear them use this theme over and over again about how we've never seen anything like this before. You're going to hear them again talking about it in Louisiana. Have you ever seen anything like it before? And they're like, no, we've never seen anything like it before. And government officials, we've never seen anything like it before. Just like Gavin Newsom last week in California when they're getting hurricanes and earthquakes at the same time. And then even a tornado blitz was rumored to have occurred. And then, of course, a wildfire. We've never seen anything like it. They're right. I have to give them credit. They are right. We've never seen anything like this before because we've never seen our own government use weaponized weather against their own citizens to this degree. Now, we know that they've created a lot of these hurricanes that have occurred in Florida and Texas. We know Katrina. We know about, obviously, a lot of the tornadoes that keep popping up in the Midwest. And I shouldn't say the Midwest, places like Oklahoma that have just been devastated by, 20 tornadoes at once. It's just absolutely incredible that people don't see it. But when you beat a lie into people's lie, just obviously believe it as truth. So that's what the climate agenda has been all about. Again, the government couldn't roll military tanks down the streets and start attacking their own citizens because the citizens would forget about all these other ridiculous things that we continue to argue about because they make us argue about it. And they would band together and fight against this, and we would have some type of a revolution. But in this case, they could just keep lighting things on fire, using direct energy weapons, blowing up chemical factories, and saying that these things are, it's all part of climate. Now, if you're somebody who believes in the climate agenda, you need to snap out of it. But even for the people who do, how come none of these people are suspicious about the chemical plants that keep blowing up right around cities, right around major water, major areas where the water is used as drinking water, city water, et cetera, et cetera? Well, now in Louisiana, not only do we have a massive chemical fire, but we have dozens and dozens of wildfires. And the first thing they immediately do is project, right? They just go, we've never had humidity like this before. And they continue on and on and on, right? And we can clearly see what they're doing. They're wiping out certain areas. They're making people, of course, homeless. And they're rounding these people up into FEMA camps. And if they're not going to FEMA camps, they're going to places like local churches for the time being, like you'll see in this video. And they're, getting their whole lives nuked is what's happening to them. So then when that happens, they have no food or water. And when you have no food or water, you can't live. So these people by default who now don't have homes and don't have food and don't have water are relying on the government to feed them and take care of them. You see how this works? And eventually they're going to have to take the mark in order to buy, sell, and pretty much live in this society. And that's what the government is doing. They're taking control of people's lives. Look at Louisiana. And of course, don't see the common coincidences here, like chemical fires blowing up. I mean, we saw Ohio. How many trains have I covered this year that have been derailed and black smoke going into water? We saw the bridge explode right outside of Philadelphia that was right next to the Delaware River. So they're contaminating the water supply so it's undrinkable. Okay, they're draining the water supply. They're drying up water preserves, et cetera, where you see, that used to be a huge pond or a huge river or a famous lake. And now it's gone. It's gone because they're drying them up, right? And then when we see these fires, the first thing people should say is, don't we have the ability to cloud seed and geoengineer rain? And they don't, right? You just see helicopters with buckets of water dumping it down when we know they have the ability to create storms and do these things. They've openly told us this for years and years, but people are just so stupid. They just go, these fires are real. And then they don't even connect the dots with the fact that the government could put them out if they wanted to. But of course they don't want to put them out. They're the ones who are creating them. So why would they want to put it out? But take a look at the nightmare that's currently occurring in Louisiana.
Tonight, a wildfire emergency in Louisiana. Several raging throughout the state. This one scorching more than 30,000 acres in southwest Louisiana. Residents forced to evacuate as firefighters race to contain these terrifying flames.
Nobody alive in Louisiana has ever seen these conditions. It's never been this hot, this dry, or this long.
In DeRuyter, Louisiana, this church now a shelter. William and Leota Lacey grabbed their grandkids and rushed out.
Have you all ever seen anything like this here?
No, never.
Jada Watkins and her grandma were unable to grab medication, including insulin, as they say the smoke closed in.
I remember when we were leaving, I couldn't breathe. I really couldn't.
The flames tied to Louisiana's drought and the hottest summer on record. Across the country, nearly 90 million are under heat alerts through the weekend. And now, another threat, a tropical depression barreling towards the Gulf. In Florida, today, the governor issuing a state of emergency ahead of the storm that could slam them next week.
Priscilla joins us now from DeRidder, Louisiana. Priscilla, the shelter there is nearing capacity.
That's right, Jose. I'm told there are nearly 70 people here. Dinner has just arrived, so folks looking to get a hot meal before they turn in for the night. And the Red Cross says that if they reach capacity here, they are prepared to open a second shelter and continue taking residents in.
Tonight, a fire emergency at one of the largest oil refineries in the U.S.
Oh, my God.
Footage shows flames and thick black smoke ripping through Marathon Petroleum in Garyville, Louisiana, about 40 miles west of New Orleans. The fire burning through a storage tank and causing the leak of a potentially dangerous chemical, prompting evacuation orders and schools to go on lockdown.
The smell was bad. And I was like, we got to go inside. I didn't want to breathe it in any longer than I needed to.
Lindsay Montz lives near the plant. Her daughter, along with hundreds of her classmates, sheltering in place at a local high school.
I was in shock. I actually took a video and I was like, oh my God. I've never seen anything like that before. It was crazy.
Marathon Petroleum, which runs the refinery, says the chemical being released into the air is known as naphtha.
It's a partially refined product that we use it as feedstock or components to make gasoline.
According to the CDC, short-term exposure is associated with eye and lung irritation, respiratory issues, and a slowing down of the nervous system.
We're pumping out the tank. We've since we're shutting down the refinery.
Garyville resident Tashelle Miles captured this video after walking outside not knowing dangerous chemicals were in the air.
I looked up and I just saw this, gigantic bellowing cloud, and my heart just dropped. I was like, oh my God.
She says there was a delay in receiving warnings about that toxic air.
If we would have received any type of notice exactly when it happened immediately, we could have said, okay, well, let's at least drive out of the area.
Now, hours after the fire began, Miles is still at home, which is near that plant. She's studying environmental science at LSU, aware of the risks of naphtha, but unwilling to leave her pets behind to go to a shelter.
Unfortunately, some of the hotels are taken up. Some people cannot just afford to up and leave at the drop of a dime right now and go to a hotel.
Mandatory evacuation orders have been lifted, but some residents like Miles left with concerns about her home and her family.
I wanted to have kids here and everything, but there's a school that's maybe a mile away from the plant, an elementary school. So it's like we're stuck.
So this is what we can expect all around the United States of America. We are under attack directly from our own government, who is working with other governments, right? I covered recently, a lot of people didn't watch the video, but I covered this meeting they're having in South Africa called BRICS, or as I said in the video, PRICS, where countries are meeting. They're talking about the destruction of the dollar. That's their main focus, destroying the dollar and creating their own currency. And what's our government doing? Nothing. If you were the president, wouldn't you say, hey, all the other governments are conspiring to take our country down. Our job is to defend our country. Let's go after these people. Now we're at war with these people because this is, pretty serious. Oh, no, our country's not doing that, right? And what are they doing? They're blatantly showing you that Biden doesn't care. It's all done by design. Of course, he's on vacation every week, et cetera, et cetera. We're fighting over ridiculous garbage about men having babies, like I always say, just the most insane stuff you could possibly imagine, while countries are conspiring to destroy our currency and our way of life. Because again, this New World Order cannot operate without the destruction of America, or as I like to call it, Babylon. So many people, as you heard in that video clip, have been forced to what? Lock down, to shelter in place. Sound familiar? Because this is going to be your way of life. They just conditioned you to be prepared to be locked down. Oh, you're going to be locked up. Well, people will be like, well, it's one thing that, we're being locked down because there's a fire out there. Of course we should stay inside. Oh, right. And then in 2 years, when they tell you that we need to lock down because we're giving off too much carbon and we need to stay inside, they'll agree with that too. And they don't realize, wait a minute, we're suddenly prisoners in our own homes, prisoners in our own country, prisoners to our own government. Wait, the same people we're supposedly electing to represent us and defend us? Oh, right. They're the ones enslaving us. So people are being ordered to lock down. People are being ordered and demanded to evacuate. So look at all the things happening at once. These giant black clouds we constantly see. America really has a giant black cloud hovering over it at this point. But what are we seeing constantly? Chemical factories. Did anybody know that all of a sudden chemical factories blow up at the same rate that people, go to the bathroom? I mean, it's like, how many times a week do we hear about chemical factories exploding and see these black smoke clouds and then find out, oh, wow, it's right next to a water supply and the water is now contaminated. And the EPA comes in. Of course, the EPA card is in the card game, the infamous Illume card game, which I'm pretty sure you can't even say the word Illume anymore without the algorithm flagging it. But the EPA, right, they come in and they go, the water's undrinkable. Or in some cases like Ohio, they tell you it is drinkable because they want people to drink the chemically altered water, the poisoned water. And then people are filming video of the water supply, the rivers and the lakes and everything else, and you just see giant chemical bubbles popping up. Oh, that's real healthy, right? So at this point, if people aren't going to start becoming suspicious, then they're lost causes. Okay? This is the problem that we're having now, is that the indoctrination, which again, they do the same thing as they do in school for the young teens out there, right? They beat these things that you've never seen with your own eyes, they beat it into your head as truth, right? We went to the moon and all this other nonsense that they make up, right? To create an alternate or a false reality in your own mind of what the world really is, and a false history they beat into your head, right? Well, they do the same thing with this. The climate has been beaten into people's heads over the last, it's really been going on since the 70s, but back then they called it global cooling, and now it's global warming, and then it was global warming. Now it's just climate change, because they realize, well, we also, because you'll see in the winter, they want to create blizzards and things like that, so people will be suspicious of global warming, so then they'll say it's climate change, right? So they can do it all year round, and they can do hot and cold, and yes and no, and burn you down or freeze you up, turn off your power in the winter so you die of hypothermia, you name it, freeze to death in your own home, right? And then, of course, they're going to come in and tell you that, well, it's the middle of the winter, you need to have your thermostat set at 50 degrees, and people will just go along with it. And they'll be like, okay, no big deal. It's all in the name of the climate. They'll never be able to wrap their head around the fact the government's doing this. And that's one of the reasons the repetition that we've seen, again, with sayings like, you can't control the weather. Well, yes, you can. You can't control Mother Nature, right? They've beaten this into people's heads so they literally don't even realize that, yes, they can create these types of weather patterns. Yes, they can. In fact, the forecast they give you pretty much most of the time is them creating those forecasts and showing you in advance of what's to come. It's unbelievable what they're getting away with. So Louisiana is just the latest, but we're going to see this all around America. Wherever we are, we're not safe because they could do this in a blink of an eye. And there's no accountability, right? And the government's not even bringing real attention to these things. They're just like, oh, another wildfire. The climate, right? They're not they're not going down there like we saw in Maui. There's no, urgency to go and help and do anything, right? Wouldn't you think there'd be an urgency? Oh, we got to get there. We got to get all the people, taken care of and get them food. It's barely any urgency. The president shows up. He's talking about his Corvette and things like that are driving people nuts. This is done by design. And it's very frightening because this is the type of weapon that's very hard for people to combat against, right? I mean, when they burn your home down, what are you supposed to do? So for people like you and me who have food supplies stored up in the event that this stuff that is happening continues to happen or whatever the future holds, we know Agenda 2030 is now Agenda 25, right? Well, they'll burn they know what a lot of us have planned, and they'll burn our supplies down, and they're going to force people into these situations where they have to depend on the government. Now, a lot of the suckers out there are fine with that because they'll never believe that the government would do this to them. They're weak-minded, right? Narcissistic at the same time. They're pretty much psychopaths we're living amongst, a lot of them. The things that they want and the things they believe are actual truth. And they're going to round these people up, and that's what the whole point is. That's the FEMA camps that are in place. That's what these, they bring in the Red Cross, right? And then, of course, like I covered recently, Maui, all these kids going missing. I mean, it's absolutely incredible that people don't see this and they're actually just going, yeah, it's just really, really hot. It's really hot. Like I've said, like show me when it's 160 degrees or 200 degrees out. Then we'll talk about, climate change. But they are manipulating the climate. They are manipulating the weather. That is true. But they're the ones who are starting these fires. They're creating these things. They're doing this by design. They're not only just evacuating people from their homes and taking their homes and their livelihoods so that they can do land grabs and all that stuff. They're also burning out trees, right? The only thing that could possibly fight, wouldn't that be the natural thing if climate change is real? Well, we need more trees. We need more trees because the trees suck in and, the carbon, and then the trees produce oxygen. It's called photosynthesis, like I discussed recently, right? Basic common knowledge. So we would need trees, right? So of course they're burning the trees. Of course they are. And where's all that carbon going that they're sucking out with the vacuums? It's going underground. That's where it's going because they're farming underground. They're doing all these things that they're telling us we can't do here underground because they know climate emissions, carbon emissions and all this stuff is total bullcrap. And they know that they can kill us off by doing it. So we're seeing this on a mass scale. People don't even realize like how quick these things are happening, right? We had Maui, then we moved to California, and California got hit with the first hurricane since 1939, even though, a lot of people reported it wasn't that bad, but there was a lot of flooding. Places were cleared out. Then they hit the earthquake there. Then we go all the way over to Louisiana, massive fires, while fires are still burning up in Canada. And now we see potential hurricanes moving into Florida. And they want you to think that this is normal weather patterns, right? But they want you to think it's normal because they go, well, it's climate change, so anything can happen. So all this you're seeing more and more, and people are just getting desensitized to it. They're expecting it day after day now. And they're just like, yeah, climate change. If they only knew what these sick psychopaths were actually doing. So prayers for people in Louisiana who are affected by this. This is going to become a common theme, right? We're going to be saying prayers for people in this state, that state, because, we don't know what they're going to hit next or who they're going to hit next. And nobody's going to become suspicious about it because it's a boogeyman. And when the boogeyman's responsible and the media doesn't cover it on a mass scale, and, look at Maui, right? They see all the people calling direct energy weapons saying it's unbelievable. We have metal melting. There's metal, just bubbles of metal melted on the ground, which no one's ever seen in the history of a wildfire. It shows you the temperature of the fire was so strong, right? People who were there were taking videos. You could see flashes in the sky. I'm sure you've all seen it. And obviously I've covered it many, many times over now. And you've seen, where's the hurricane? Oh, it's that far away? So how does winds of 30 miles per hour from like a storm that's so far off the coast actually cause gust winds like that, right? But nobody cares. They really don't. They're so distracted with nonsense that they're never going to realize that the government is plotting against us. And really, when you think about what's going on, even if you can't wrap your head around the whole thing with the climate, which I understand it's hard to do, especially if you're just waking up, because it just seems like insane and it's like your head's going to explode. Same thing with the stuff with the children. A lot of people can't wrap their heads around it. They don't want to because it's so bothersome. It makes you so sick hearing this stuff. Look at the stuff that the media does with the left and the right. That should be the most easy way at this point, where we just see them constantly irritating and poking at both sides and pissing everybody off, like poking a bee's nest, right? And everybody's just angry at each other. It's all by them. If the TV wasn't doing this stuff, you think people would be angry at one another on the left and the right if they weren't doing deliberately the Roe v. Wade and then pushing all the trans into the schools? They're doing it by design to create this civil unrest. People need to wake up, but unfortunately it's too late. So prayers to people out there in Louisiana. Obviously, again, watch out for more of these chemical bombs to go off. Watch out for these huge clouds of smoke, right? No one's suspicious of these things. They're like, oh yeah, chemicals blow up all the time. Oh, right. And what was it last year? Oh, right. Last year, we just saw like every single food manufacturing plant explode and people weren't suspicious. Oh, what happened there? Oh, an airplane flew into it. Oh, the funniest of all of them, it's not funny, but I mean like the most ridiculous was the baby formula. We heard people constantly talking about the baby formula. Even the mainstream media picked up on it. And they were like, oh, we shut it down because there was, whatever was going on, a disease or something they said, or they found something in one of them, right? They shut it down for months. They're like, oh yeah, we'll reopen it now that people are poking at us. And then 2 days later, they shut it down again because there was a flood. How convenient. And nobody picked up on that, right? Nobody's going, all right, there's something going on here. They don't want baby formula out there. They don't want, just so many things, right? How about how many mothers out there who are giving birth, which is very rare because nobody's giving birth anymore. No one's suspicious of that, by the way. But how about how many mothers out there don't even have breast milk supply? Like, it's just a thing. They're like, oh yeah, I dried up. I don't have breast milk. You ever hear these stories? I've been reading tons of this stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, like did women 100 years ago not have breast milk? Of course they have breast milk. Of course. Well, what do? Why don't people have breast milk? Oh, because of the crap that they're putting in the sky and the food. So the women aren't able to produce breast milk. right? But nobody's suspicious of that. Nobody's suspicious of the fact that nobody's able to have babies anymore, that they have to do some type of procedure to even get pregnant. I mean, it's insanity. They are destroying the human race. And then on top of it, they're trying to alter people's DNA. These people are absolute psychopaths. They're worse than that. They're demons. And we know that they are for a fact. But pray for the people in Louisiana. Keep an eye out on these stories because they're probably coming to a town near you. And I'm not saying that to create fear. You'll see. You'll see. It's going to come to all of us. And if it's not the wildfire, it'll be tornadoes, right? Because there's places where they can't really create wildfires because there's not enough wooded area to create it, right? So what do they do then? Oh, then they'll throw tornadoes at you. And they'll just say it's because the ice caps are melting, and these suckers will believe it. Absolutely insane. I thank you guys for being here. Hope you're doing well. God bless all of you as always, and your families.